Hi, greetings, it's me, Dr. Paul Gerhardt, and today's lecture video is on employee motivation. And you probably know what motivation is, but just in case you need a refresher, it could be defined as the inner force that drives individuals to accomplish personal and organizational goals. I like this definition because if you really think about it, most people do their best when they are motivated. And when they're not motivated, they might be getting things done, but the more motivation, the more things can get done. And of course, more creativity and innovation can come from highly motivated people. Well, leaders truly have the most influence on employee motivation, a lot more than they may realize. So if you really want to help your employees accomplish organizational goals, you have to understand the performance formula. One of the things that I like to talk about is the fact that motivating really requires first energizing, directing, and sustaining, and like the theory goes, things at rest tend to stay at rest, and things in motion tend to stay in motion. So you have to get things from the resting state into the motivated state. And so we do that through inspiration. And inspiration comes from the Greek word to breathe. And so as leaders, we have the ability to breathe life into people and spark a fire in them and get them excited to get people motivated. So if you want them to perform, you really need to look at this performance formula seriously. It's all about recognizing that this is the algebra that your teacher told you about in high school. And if you look at the formula, is performance equals ability times motivation times resources. What this really means that if people aren't performing properly, you have to do your math. So if you know the variables, and the variables are ability or motivation and then resources, you have to ask yourself, well, do they have the ability to do it? Well, they can think on their own. They have their hands and legs, so they have the ability, probably the ability to do it. I know that I've trained them. Okay, so if you train them properly, you have to ask yourself, do they have the right resources? Yep, they have a computer, the computer works. They have enough budget. They have enough people around them to support them. Aha, well then it must be motivation. Well, the tricky thing about motivation is that we are all motivated by different things. So if you do the math, solve for X, and you know it's not ability, you know it's not resources, it's got to be motivation, then you got to figure out how to increase productivity by motivating your employees. And so that's the whole deal, is we're talking about motivational theories. And theories don't have to be so theoretical. Theories really were developed when social scientists and psychologists took a look at what seems to be really happening here and why do things happen. And so we have to look at equity theory. Equity theory is really interesting because essentially it says that people are just comparing themselves to other people. I like to use the example that if you're getting paid the same as somebody else, but they are not doing as much as you, that feels like an inequitable situation. So you could do a couple of different things. You could slow down. You could ask for a raise. You could try to get the other employee to work better. So there's a few different things there. What happens in a lot of different organizations when people don't feel like they are being treated equitably, very often they steal. And so that's what's really important, is people are always seeking equity, and then they're doing things to make the situation feel like it's more equitable. So that's a really important concept. So this is why in a lot of organizations, supplies go missing, computers go missing, or there's embezzling taking place. Well, that really stems from people not feeling like they're being compensated appropriately. So it really is important to remember that you as a leader need to make sure that you understand what feels equitable. So I like to use the example of the professor who accidentally saw the paycheck of a coworker with less seniority, less education, and less time with the organization. And when he saw the paycheck accidentally on his coworker's desk, he went straight to the dean. Well, he was going to give the dean a piece of his mind. He says, I just saw Professor X's paycheck on accident. I noticed that she was making more than me. This doesn't feel fair. I need a raise. And then the dean said, well, you probably don't know this, but Professor X actually gives up her Saturdays for 8 hours so she could chair the XYZ committee. And if you would like to chair the XYZ committee, you could have that raise instead. And of course the professor says, nope, I will keep my paycheck the way it is. I like my Saturdays. So sometimes people don't know what they don't know. And so it means that you as a leader need to have an assertive conversation. So some 3 tips to motivate using equity theory really are: number 1, understand what employees perceive as equitable. Make sure that rewards are equitable, and then reward high performance to motivate people to work harder to attain rewards. One of my favorite theories came around in the 1920s with McClellan. And McClellan essentially said that people are motivated by primarily one of each of these: achievement, power, and affiliation. And you are primarily motivated by one of these things. So if you look at these different 3 things that you're probably telling yourself, yeah, I'm motivated by all these things. Well, yes, you probably are, but which one is most important to you? Which is second most important to you? And which is third most important to you? And you can hear what's important to people, and observe. People who are achievement oriented, they're probably in some shape or form saying, hey, look what I did, or wow, isn't this a good job, or something to that effect. And if you are not praising people as a leader who are high achievement, it feels like abuse to someone. So you need to recognize the good work that high achievement oriented people have. Second is power. If you think about it, people with power needs are people who are constantly doing things to be in charge. And you can observe and you can listen. I want to be in charge about this, and you can reward those people and get them to stay motivated when you give them some autonomy, or you give them the ability to have power over accomplishments. Finally, the third is affiliation. A lot of people will go, yeah, I went to City University. I'm really proud of my time at City. Or I'm really proud of working for Microsoft or whatever organization that you work for. When you're hearing people use statements like that, you motivate people by helping create an organization where people should be proud of the organization. That it's profitable. Our customers are happy. We have great coworkers. The coworker thing is a really important part. So you can see here I've written down that there's a fact that there's a correlation between high achievement need and high performance. So hire as many high performance people as you can by listening in interviews for statements that show that people are achievement oriented. People need high feedback, and especially if their personality is high achievement. So we as leaders need to learn how to motivate people. This next theory is HERZBERG'S 2-factor theory. Sorry about the slide being cut off at the top, but that says HERZBERG'S 2-factor theory. And essentially, it's about hygiene factors and motivators. And hygiene factors do not motivate. If you were in my workshop, I'd tell you to repeat, hygiene factors do not motivate. And satisfied needs no longer motivate. And so each of those things means that you have to recognize what's a hygiene factor and keep those replenished. And then you need to make sure you recognize what the specific motivators are for each employee, because for each employee it could be a different thing or a combination of different things. So let's take a look at what hygiene factors are. Hygiene factors includes status, salary, security, relationship with peers, working conditions, supervision. So I got a raise last year. Do you think it still motivates me knowing that I got a raise last year? Of course it does. I need a raise this year. Same with status. You know, in the workplace, we need to feel like we are respected and that we can grow with the organization. We have a title that people can respect. Security, one of the best things that we can do is make people recognize that they're valued and that they'll have a job tomorrow, especially in this job market, right? So relationships with peers, people, some companies like Taco Bell is a really interesting one. You know, here they pay employees minimum wage or close to minimum wage. Well, how do they keep people from just going from job to job to job? Because when you lose an employee, you lose their experience. Well, you create an environment where people like to work with each other. And so that's a really powerful one that a lot of organizations use, is they create situations where people don't want to abandon their friends and they feel loyal to their friends. So it takes a smart manager to really recognize how to create an environment where people are loyal to their friends and they love coming and seeing their friends. And of course, working conditions too. Are the working conditions safe? Do you make it easy for employees to do what they do? Or do you make it hard for people by being selfish with resources? So people must be set up for success and they have to feel safe, right? And then supervision too is really important. You know, do they know who their boss is? It's really kind of a bad thing to have multiple bosses. So you have to kind of respect the hierarchical chain, no matter where you are in the organization. Just because you've got a manager under you who has employees, don't boss around his or her employees. That is your subordinates, their leaders' job to do. So you have to really recognize how important it is for people to know who their supervisor is. The supervisor, if you're supervising people, you have to be available to people, and you need to have like an open door policy where it's safe to approach you, to ask questions, and even make mistakes. So those are some things that good supervisors do. And then company policy. You know, if you're working for an organization and it's got a low tolerance, no tolerance policy against harassment of any type, that doesn't motivate people. It just makes it safe for people. So you have to recognize that hygiene factors must be in place, but they're not things that motivate people. If you remove them, people do become less motivated, but having them in place isn't what motivates people. Hygiene factors don't motivate because removing, as I said, a dissatisfying factor doesn't motivate people, but it will demotivate people. Employees have insatiable appetites for hygiene factors, so you constantly have to make sure you've got the right hygiene factors in place. Motivated people seek more hours of work, not less, and then employees are not challenged by horizontal job loading. Well, what is horizontal job loading? Well, that's, hey, give me more work to do for the same pay. Well, that's obviously not going to motivate people, so just a few tips on that. So you have to really think about what are the motivational factors, and sometimes you can use the golden rule, and sometimes you have to recognize the platinum rule. So the golden rule is do unto others as you want them to do unto you, and what I'm insinuating is some people might be motivated by the same things as you, but don't make the mistake that they are motivated by the same things as you, because they're not you. So that's why I like the platinum rule. Platinum rule simply states that treat others as they wish to be treated, which is a great thing to do, especially when you're thinking about keeping them motivated. So here's some things to consider to help motivate people. If you've got those hygiene factors in place, make sure that you are recognizing their achievements, doing the recognition itself, help them have jobs that they like, give them responsibility, make sure there's room for advancement, and of course personal growth. People, it's kind of human nature. We constantly want to be growing, and when we stop growing, it's essentially when we die. So we're spending about at least a third of our lives in the workplace. So as a leader, create an environment where people feel motivated. Include these motivators in your daily operations and how you communicate with people and where you put your focus. People are not machines. So here's intrinsic motivation really is the most powerful thing. So here's what we can do. We can enrich employees' jobs. We can aid managers in discovering their real functions and developing staff, give employees projects that they can be proud of accomplishing, and challenge employees. And of course, work needs to be able to be accomplished. I mentioned that horizontal job loading doesn't motivate. Well, vertical job loading motivates. That's giving people more responsibility. Removing controls, increasing accountability, can allow people to complete the work that they're doing, give them challenges with more difficult tasks, and allow people to become experts. There's just a few things there. So when you're applying HERZBERG'S motivational theory, you need to really involve employees as much as you possibly can. Allow them to participate. Make sure that they feel like they are fully represented, and reward them. I used the comment about a stock ownership plan. It's really wise. I'm not going to talk about this story, but in my book, Diversity at Work, I use the example of the two CEOs. They're competing companies, and they're bragging that they understand how to keep employees motivated and giving their very best. Well, the bottom line is money doesn't motivate everybody, so you have to be able to recognize what does motivate people and what doesn't motivate them. So if you're interested in one of my books, Diversity at Work has a lot of great stories and examples of how to show respect and leverage what people have to offer. So diversity is not just about color of skin, it's about thinking, it's about background. There's so many things that makes us human, and we as leaders need to find ways to respect who we are. So that's my book, Diversity at Work. Makes a great Christmas gift for all your friends and family. Theory X and Theory Y. These are really great theories from McGregor. And essentially, McGregor talks about it's a leader's attitude. We could always see people's attitudes, and that's what's really important. How we talk to people, how we look at people, how we treat people makes people understand our attitudes about them. So if you think people are stupid or not as smart as you're probably talking down to them. You probably are acting in a way that makes people feel like you think they don't like their work and they avoid it, or they have no ambition, they don't want any responsibility, and they would rather follow than lead, or they're self-centered, or that they resist change, or they're not, they don't care about the organization, or whatever. Your attitude, you have to really pay attention to your way of being and what you say around your employees, or they will lose motivation. But McGregor also goes on to point out that if you have employees that have these qualities, you want to make sure that you are doing what it takes to keep them motivated in how you treat them. So don't be empowering people who aren't yet ready for it. And there are employees who don't like work. So you have to, hopefully, if you've hired them because they have the right skills and education, get them what they need in order to get them, so you can treat them with the theory Y type attitudes. And so here are some of the things, the attitudes that you as a leader can make sure that people feel like they're valued. So recognize that work can be as natural as play. People will be self-directed to meet their work objectives if they're committed. Here are the attitudes here. People will be committed to their objectives if the rewards are in place that addresses the higher needs of such as self-fulfillment. That people want responsibility, that people can handle responsibility and want to be creative. So that's really ideally where you want to get it, is where If there are THEORYX employees, give them the boot in the hind end to get them motivated. But, they'll remember how you treat them. So really be smart in how you use the motivational techniques. But remember, your attitude truly is powerful. This is one of the most famous theories of all. Everybody's heard of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. This book, written by Maslow, came out in the 1950s. Maslow was a contemporary of Carl Jung, who was a contemporary of Sigmund Freud. So here's another psychologist who recognized that as a foundation, people have got to have a solid foundation. If you remove this foundation, people lose motivation. So at the very bottom level is the physical needs. And how do employers provide for the physical needs? Well, if you're not paying them enough to be able to have a roof over their head and food in their mouths, they're probably not going to be motivated. You can't go all the way to self-actualization without making sure that these bottom four are in place. And so each of these needs to build on the other, and people have an insatiable appetite for motivators. That means, so once a satisfied need is satisfied, you have to add more. So once you give them a raise, you got to remember to give them a raise, the following year, the following quarters, whatever they're expecting, so that they are constantly having that as a motivator. They need to feel like they've got safety and security and stability. They need to feel like they are loved and belong and included. You have to recognize their ego and give promotions. You recognize achievement. And then finally, you need to give people enough autonomy and achievement. So if they want to go to school, maybe you should be paying for their education. Help them find their way to the positions that will help fulfill them the most within your organization. That's really what's important here. So when you, I like to use the example of maybe you're paying them enough, maybe you're providing a safe work environment, but you've given them a responsibility to fire people, and your job is to be the bad person. You give them the job to be the bad person at work. Well, if they don't feel like they're respected by other individuals, you can't pay them enough to do their jobs. So you have to recognize that all of these things need to be in place, and they must be all the time. And when you remove one of these layers, their motivation will decrease. So if they're not motivated, take a look at what maybe you have an opportunity to add to keep people motivated. Losing an employee that's dissatisfied, and they may sabotage their job so they get fired. But losing an employee is very expensive to the organization. Studies have shown that it usually is significantly less expensive to keep employees satisfied. So that means that leaders need to be active in the process of leading people. So expectancy theory is Victor Vroom's theory, and it essentially says that you have to understand what people expect, and then you give it to them, and it's got to have value. I like to use the story of when I was a 16-year-old kid. Essentially, my boss yelled at me. And he yelled at me because my job was at night to come in the middle of the night and scrape all the thousands of pounds of produce crates and clean them on the back deck. And I was stretching my back at the time, and he walked out to see what I was doing, and he yelled at me and said, "Gerhardt, what are you doing? I'm not paying you to stand around." I said, "Take a look at everything I've accomplished. Got all these hundreds of pounds done, and I'm just stretching my back. It's killing me." And my boss, recognizing that I had been working very hard, wanted to reward me, and he says, "Yeah, why don't you go on the shelf and grab yourself a generic can of soda." Well, I didn't even drink soda. And so that's the balance that this theory, expectancy times balance equals motivation. So that didn't motivate me to want to work any harder because he wanted to give me a generic can of pop. So, but I think about that all the time because are you giving people what they expect? I've worked for a company for a long time that would hold a bonus in front of us. If you meet these goals, you're gonna get a bonus. And so we become so close to meeting the goals. We made the goals so outrageously difficult to accomplish. They just held it as a carrot in front of us. And so people at my line of the organization rarely got bonuses. And it was really kind of a sad deal, and they lost a lot of really good employees. But that was a technique that they used to manipulate people. So you've got to really make sure that the goals are achievable and that the rewards meet the expectation of people. So people have choices, so you have to really understand what people's perceptions are. And perceptions really about value is so important. So reward people with the rewards that are going to have value. Well, we've already talked about equity theory, but essentially it really is about looking at what people perceive as equitable. They're always comparing their outputs to other people's outputs. And the bottom line is, if people are satisfied, their inputs and their outputs are equal. People don't feel like they're being rewarded properly. They're going to do things like reduce their outputs or reduce their inputs. They may steal. If you're over-rewarded, people don't usually get upset when you're over-rewarded. They may increase inputs or reduce outputs. They may equity. So people want to be seen and seen as being fair and being treated fairly. And of course, B.F. Skinner's in the 1970s really great theory about reinforcement. And it's about recognizing that when something happens, it's the behavior or performance, there's consequences, either reinforcement or punishment. When something good happens, of course, you want to reinforce it by saying thank you for a job well done. Of course, it really is wise to help people know how what they have done, how it makes a bigger difference, and then it's sincerely appreciated. It doesn't take a lot of time to do it, but you do have to be sincere and authentic about it. Skinner talks about avoidance reinforcement, which is also called negative reinforcement, and that there are rules that people break, there are negative consequences. So people have to really be aware of what the consequences are. Sometimes they see employees get fired, and that can ruin the morale, but if they know they got fired because they were breaking the rules most of the time, it helps maintain organizational culture where people want to do the right thing. Well, it's like speeding. If you don't have any police officers out on the road enforcing speeding, speed limits, people will probably continue to speed. So Skinner also talks about extinction. With extinction, the manager ignores behaviors and withholds rewards in order to get the employee to perform to expectations. So really recognizing that there's a lot of things that go into place when you're managing people, and ultimately you have to have the right punishments in place, including firing, but of course you want to do things legal and you want to document things and give people an opportunity to turn things around. That's one way to help people feel like they're in an equitable situation. So some final notes here is some things to remember. Ultimately, you cannot motivate people, they motivate themselves. So you can inspire people to want to do better, to give their best. You need to help create an environment that's conducive to self-motivation. Everybody's different, so you have to take time to understand what will motivate each of your employees. Ask them what motivates them. Ask them what equitable rewards look like. Listening is one of the most powerful tools a leader has, so listen to what's important to people. Observe them. Use the appropriate motivational strategy for each employee and what motivates people can change over time. So keep that in mind. Motivation is an ongoing process. Don't get people motivated and then forget about them. Develop policies and procedures that support motivational processes. Policies need to be overlooked all the time and updated accordingly. Lack of motivation could lead to higher employee turnover, so think think about the bad apple syndrome. The bad apple in a barrel ruins the rest of the apples. So when you see somebody who is not motivated, get them motivated so other people can stay motivated too. So that's why leadership truly is an active process. Not all jobs can or need to be enriched. If you have employees on the job, use them. If you can't use them, get rid of them. And if you can't get rid of them, you're going to have a motivational problem. So people are not machines, but they do have the ability to influence other people, create a situation where people want to work and are constantly growing with the organization. So people shouldn't be leaving your organization and taking their talents with them, and potentially their customers and their coworkers with them, because that's very, very expensive to the organization. I'm a firm believer that the biggest controllable expense is employee turnover, and that's directly related to how an manager leads their employees. So be an active leader and recognize how much influence you have on their success. So we're not going to do this activity, but I do want you to know I appreciate your time. Thanks so much. I hope you've enjoyed the video, and more than that, I hope that you have a great day, because only you get to choose how you feel about it. I'm Dr. Paul Gerhardt.